Hey guys, Will with Lost Visions Performance. Today we are working on a 2021 Toyota Rav4 all-wheel drive. Today we're going to be installing a 2-inch Readylift lift kit. So this one is the Rav in question, getting the lift. We've got our kit over here. And it seems to be a pretty nice kit so far. It's the first time installing a Readylift system. Already glanced through their installation instructions. Looks like they got a pretty good setup in there for you to read through. These are the front strut mount spacers and are offset to make sure of correct camber setup once it is lifted. These would be the rear spring spacers. These are spacers for the rear subframe, as well as some extra spacers for the subframe, rear subframe brackets. Longer bolts for the rear subframe, miscellaneous hardware, washers and everything like that. So overall, it's a total bolt-on setup. It is obviously recommended to get it aligned afterwards. We're just going to give you a walkthrough of what it takes to do this lift kit. If you're going to be doing it yourself, or if you're having someone do it, at least you know what is all entailed on it. This one will work for the 2019 to 2022 model. I don't think it matters if it's a two-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Most of them will be lifting would probably be the all-wheel drive, I would assume, but this one is all-wheel drive, so we will get started on this and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so we have the Rav up on the lift, got the wheels off and everything already. Obviously you do not need a lift to be able to install your lift, but it definitely helps. If you do have it on jack stands or whatever, obviously always just make sure that you're very careful with all that. On this one, one of the first things we do, we already went through and loosened most of this stuff up. You will be taking off your sway bar link where it attaches to the strut because you are removing the strut assembly to install the lift. This one is a 17 millimeter. This one is brand new, so nothing's all jammed up, locked up, or rusted up or anything like that. So we were just able to hit that with an impact and loosen that up. If you're doing it without an impact, or if this is all corroded or anything like that, it does have a spot to put an Allen wrench in there. Well, we didn't have to do that on this one, so we will undo that, drop the sway bar link off. You have your spot over here where your ABS wire comes. This has a little snap-in connector. Just get in there with a screwdriver or your panel popper tool and just pop that off of there. And then there is one 14 millimeter bolt that holds the brake hose, as well as the extra bracket for the ABS wire. And then your two strut to knuckle bolts. These nuts are 22 millimeter. These ones, on this one I didn't do it because I know it's brand new and hasn't been altered. On anything else, I'll always mark them for where they went, because while these ones factory are non-adjustable, a lot of vehicles can have ones that are adjustable. So when you go to do that, you go to put it back together, and then your camber and everything can be way off after messing with it because they'll have the eccentrics in the middle. These ones don't have that, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And on these ones, the factory bolts, upper and lower, are the same bolts, so you don't have to worry about mixing them up. But like I said, I always match those so I know not to worry about it when I'm going to put it back together. But I have all these loosened up. Go ahead and back these off a little bit more. And they are kind of a little bit of a tolerance fit. So just back the nuts off a little bit, give them a little tap with the hammer, and they'll go ahead and slide back. Then I just gently push up on the whole knuckle assembly and hub assembly, and then you're able to pull the bolts out after you take off the nuts, obviously. For the instructions for the lift kit, they talk about taking off the tie rod ends. I'm not going to do that on this. We have enough movement room without undoing this, so I'm not going to mess with any of that. You may want to, but I really don't see the need to do it. So me personally, I'd skip that setup. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off. Got our sway bar link off. All this stuff here are 14, are both 22s. And then we will bring the vehicle back down and undo our 3 strut mount nuts, and then we can pull the whole assembly out, and then I will show you how to install the spacer plate. All right, so we have the strut assembly down and out of the vehicle. You do want to be very careful when you actually take out your 2 bolts that go to the knuckle and let this set down. You can very easily hyperextend the CV axle and actually pull apart the joints. Most oftentimes you're able to turn them a little bit and get them to pop back in, but you might get a vibration from it not being centered correctly, so better not to deal with that. On a lot of setups like that, it's better to undo the CV axle nut, take that off completely, and push the axle in through the hub assembly. That way you have free range of the knuckle to be able to move without putting excessive pull on the CV axle. On this one, we did not do that. Left all that on and just was very gentle with letting it down from there. Also, with not taking off the tie rod ends like the instructions say to, that also helps hold the knuckle inward a little bit so that it's not let it have as much free travel out. So just be very gentle with it, shouldn't have any problems. Obviously, whole assembly is out. There's a total of 3 14mm nuts up here. These are all the factory ones. We will keep those, and those will be used to reattach the new setup in here. Here we have the complete strut assembly. You do not have to undo the spring or anything like that for this kit. It's essentially the same as a level lift. So this is the spacer that goes on there, and they give you some supplied 14mm nuts to tighten this onto the original strut hat. They do give you torque specs on it. I don't remember how much it is. It's not very much. You'll have to look in your manual for when you get your kit. Honestly though, to get a torque wrench on there would be pretty damn difficult. Just get these good and tight. You don't have to worry about it too much. All the stuff, they also recommend rechecking everything after 500 miles, as with every lift kit. But if you get these good and tight, it's not real crazy. So these will go back in there. I still have to tighten these 3 down, and then we can put the strut assembly back in just as it was factory and use the factory nuts to secure these into the chassis. One thing to say, when you're installing it, it does need to be set up like this. As you can see, the offset for the mount to correct the camber for the lift. And then, easy way to remember it, when you're looking, we'll start it there. When you're looking at the top of it, you will be able to read the R, the little Readylift logo through there. I can show you on this side. And then you see the Readylift R. That's perfect. So once we get all this set up in there, we will very lightly tighten them down, not torque them. Just get them a little bit snug just so it's pulled all the way up there. Assemble the rest of the suspension stuff back to it just as it was factory, the exception of there are some sway bar brackets that I will show you here in just a second. And then these ones will not be tightened until the vehicle is back on the ground. So you want to make sure and do that. That makes sure that they're setting properly. You don't have any extra bind on there, or mostly get any movement out of it afterwards. So you want to set it on the ground and then do the final torque on these on both sides. Also, while you're doing this, it is a very good idea to undo both sides of the sway bar for obviously just the tops, but for left and right side, that'll make it where you're not fighting it to put them together afterwards. So the sway bar can move up and down totally. If you have one side bolted up, it'll make it a real bear to push down the other one. So you don't want to have to deal with that. Leave both sides undone until you have the lift on for both of the front sides. Then go ahead and put these in once you have the different brackets. I'll show you here in just a second. So I'm going to get this up in there and we will go from there. All right, the front portion of the lift is essentially done. Got all this on. Everything goes back together just the way it came apart, with the exception of the sway bar. So on this one, because now the whole strut assembly is pushed down because of the lift, the sway bar brackets come here to put the last mounting bolt more upwards as to not put too much stress on the sway bar assembly itself. So they give you the supplied bolt and nut setup to bolt this bracket to the strut assembly. These ones are 19mm. Get this all bolted on there, goes as such, which they also show you in their instructions. And then your sway bar link bolts to the upper bolt hole of this bracket with the factory hardware. So that keeps everything exactly as it was. We have our two 22mm nuts tightened down for our strut to knuckle bolts. We reattached our little ABS harness that just snaps on. And then the brake hose and ABS bracket bolted back together with this 14mm. and then it just goes up to a strut mounts, which we already tightened the ones for the strut, factory strut mount to the lift spacer with the 3 14mm supplied nuts from Readylift. And then we have these ones lightly tightened down, which are the factory nuts going to the actual spacer bracket. These ones, we don't torque these down until the vehicle is back on the ground fully, and then we will go ahead and tighten them down totally. And just remember, when it's going on, when you're looking at it from the fender side, you will be able to properly read the Readylift R. That's how you'll know that that portion is set up correctly. Otherwise, if you have that oriented differently, actually I'm not entirely sure that you really could bolt it together incorrectly and make it work. But if you were, your either caster or camber would be wickedly off. So just make sure you can read your Readylift R right there, and it'll be perfectly set to go. So we're good with this portion. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the back. That one has a little bit more going on.